Well, here it is. Russia has just now officially failed its final attempt in its ultimate counteroffensive, and now it is Ukraine's time to attack. In addition to that, Wagner is in extremely deep trouble, because recently there was a leakage of information about its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, which completely compromises his future as a human being. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and see some more cringe material. And so recently, in one of the biggest cities of Russia, St. Petersburg, another civilian carrying a nuclear missile Sarmat, which was destined to go against America, he has been stopped by the police. And I mean, just the very idea of civilians carrying such dangerous weapons, it's already crazy enough. But then if you think about it, the police stopped him trying to fight against the West. Does this mean that the police was now discrediting this special military operation? That's a very interesting question for the Russian authorities. But okay, now let's get back to a little bit more serious news and talk about the accelerating support of the West to Ukraine. And first of all, as you can see from this video, Italy has given Ukraine its self-propelled artillery systems called M109L. Then we have a picture of an American infantry combat fighting vehicle called M2A2 Bradley, which are already being operational in Ukraine. And next, here's a pretty interesting thing that Canada will give to Ukraine a Russian confiscated plane AN-124. So as you can see, it is not just Ukrainians using their own military vehicles. It is not just the West which helps Ukraine. But now, and I mean it also used to be like this in the past, but now Russia also contributes towards its defeat. Next we have a country of Slovakia, which mentioned that they have finalized sending 13 of its MiG-29 planes to Ukraine. And speaking about the aerial vehicles, here is yet another very interesting thing, because in this news report we can see in the background the American UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. Yes, it is also being used inside Ukraine. And ultimately, shortly after Finland has joined NATO, they already started erecting the fences with the borders with Russia. And just one last quick word about NATO before I talk about the update from the east and the south of Ukraine. And long story short, the alliance has mentioned that they will be ready to repel the Russian aggression in case there is at least any sign of combat activity close to its borders, or especially if something like this happens on the territory of the alliance members. And well, I think at this point it is pretty safe to say that Putin is losing. And this will be quite the understatement. But if you want to see his total defeat along with all of us, just please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1 minute summaries every single day. The link will be down below. Alright, and now please allow me to literally just give you a few words from the south and the east of Ukraine, and then we will talk about the offensive of Russia that has officially failed and why it is Ukraine's time now. And to begin with, right here we have a video from Kazan, located inside Russia, and as you can see there was a big fire located on the tank training grounds. According to the locals, they were able to hear a very loud noise coming from this place, which followed by the fire and a lot of smoke. But interesting fact, according to the emergency services of the region, there was not a single report of a fire coming from these military training grounds. What a coincidence again, right? Next we have a video from already familiar Belgorod, where recently, allegedly, a Ukrainian drone, at least according to the Russian side, has hit a thermal power plant. Then we have the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians increased their artillery fire in Kherson and in Zaporozhye region recently. And then the report also claims that Russians continue their offensive along Svatove-Kreminna road, mainly focusing this time next to Kreminna, doing some limited offensive with absolutely no results. Going a little bit to the north, it looks like that Russians are preparing to defend the Kupiansk front line. And ultimately, speaking about the most active combat zone in the east of Ukraine, as you can see right here from this map, it shows us the changes in territorial control. Russians were able to advance a little bit closer to the western parts of this city in the last 48 hours. And by the way, yes, you heard me right. Russians are preparing to defend the Kupiansk front line, which to be honest is just one of many. And so right now, as promised, let's talk about Russians officially failing their final offensive. Originally, this statement came to us from Kirill Budanov, who said that Russians have successfully failed their massive offensive in Vuhledar on March 31st. And according to him, since he's the chief of defense intelligence of Ukraine, Russians have no longer any opportunities anywhere, neither the personnel nor the military equipment to resume or start any other offensive across any front lines. And most likely, this massive offensive Kirill Budanov refers to was this attempt of Russians to once again advance to the south of Vuhledar, which ended in complete disaster and destruction of Russian military personnel and their vehicles. Because I mean, yes, as you can see from this picture alone, in this one single spot, 4 Russian tanks have been shut down completely and forever. And allegedly, it was estimated that Russians wanted to finally capture Vuhledar in order to approach Avdiivka and surround Ukrainians. I mean, for Russians, this sounds way too ambitious, that is why it never worked. And the culmination of the Russian offensive has also been confirmed by the Institute for the Study of War, which mentioned that Russians were not able to advance in Vuhledar, in Marinka, in Avdiivka, which was supposed to be their second Bakhmut, but they failed there as well. And even the intensity of attacks in Bakhmut itself also significantly decreased. So as you can see, this final failure of Russians in Vuhledar was basically the final failed attempt of Russians in their ultimate grand offensive, which were they supposed to be doing right now, and they didn't do anything, but instead they started switching to defenses, like for example in Kupiansk, as mentioned previously. And this can only mean one thing. And I think you can already guess it, which basically means that if Russians are not attacking, it is now time for Ukraine. And to begin with, we have this video from somewhere of the front lines in the eastern Ukraine, most likely where you can see a huge relocation of Ukrainian forces closer to the point of contact. In addition to that, Ukrainians recently intensified their attacks against Russian electronic warfare equipment and radars, and as you can see from this statistic, such increase in specifically targeting this kind of military equipment has always been before Ukrainian counteroffensive. The very first time it happened, the next time Ukrainians liberated Kharkov region, and the next time it happened, Ukrainians started liberating Kherson. And now, just take a look at this spike. I mean, without a doubt, Ukrainians are preparing something big. And well, according to some Western analytics, as they say, the counteroffensive of Ukraine will begin on April 30th, which as of right now is a pretty speculative thing to say. Because according to the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Alexei Danilov, he says that the decision about the counteroffensive of Ukraine will be taken by Zelensky and his general staff the moment before the counteroffensive begins. So as of right now, there is no way of telling when it happens, we can only all assume. But nevertheless, the both sides, the West and Ukraine, they both agree that this counteroffensive will be complicated and risky, but it is not going to be impossible. Because, for example, it is estimated that approximately 35,000 Ukrainian soldiers will be facing up to 140,000 Russian soldiers across the front line of a total of almost 1,000 1,000 kilometers, and Russians have been digging and fortifying themselves for the last several months. The exact location of this counteroffensive is also not certain as we speak, but it is pretty obvious that in order for it to be successful, all kinds of Ukrainian military, air force, the ground troops, the artillery, they all need to work together in order to achieve their common goal, and this collaboration between them needs to be pretty much perfect. And the best chances that Ukrainians have right now in order to make this counteroffensive successful is to attack swiftly and brutally in one place and to breach the defenses of Russians as fast as possible and to make them run. Because after all, the results of this counteroffensive will determine the future negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and which country will be pushing its narrative. And even though this counteroffensive will be extremely complicated, but not impossible, like mentioned previously, the preparations of Ukraine must be at a 110%, because as we remember, in the past other countries already underestimated Ukraine in its ability to liberate its own land. And speaking once again about Kirill Budanov, he is certain that already this year Ukraine will return a major parts of its land and most likely even enter Crimea. And by the way, slowly but surely, Ukrainians are already returning their land, even in places like Bakhmut, where Russians are technically superior in comparison to any other places in Ukraine. Such as, for example, based on this video which came to us from a Ukrainian soldier fighting inside Bakhmut, and as you can see, they're clearing out the trenches from Russian and Wagner soldiers. The entire video is more than 2 minutes long of close combat footage, and if you want to see the entire version in addition to all the other uncensored videos, you can find them on my Patreon. The link will be down below, and there's still 1 week of free access. And speaking about Wagner, we have reports that the Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, has started to recruit prisoners inside conventional Russian army, which is exactly the tactics that Wagner used to do until in February they were prohibited from recruiting prisoners. So as you can see, it looks like that the contradictions between Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Ministry of Defense of Russia have once again resumed. But to be honest, this is not the worst thing that happened to Wagner recently. Because last week, according to the creator of Gulagu.net, Vladimir Osechkin, he said that he will release such materials, interviews and videos compromising Yevgeny Prigozhin that nobody else in the world and especially in Russia will ever want to do anything with him as a person. And long story short, fast forward to this week, we received these videos. And basically what is happening, these are just several fragments of several interviews, and basically those ex-Wagner soldiers who are right now being pardoned and are living in Russia, they're talking about the atrocities and the forceful orders that their commanders and even Prigozhin himself was forcing them to do. According to the first soldiers, whenever Russians were entering cities, they were forced to eliminate whoever they can see, including civilians and including kids. According to him, unfortunately, the youngest one he had to eliminate was just 5, and then he even had to clear out the entire basement full of at least 300 to 400 civilians. And then we have another ex-Wagner soldier who is talking about that he was forced by some orders from above to eliminate even some of his own comrades, especially the ones who were not following the orders from their commandment. And basically what happened, they put them in the big ditch, approximately 60 of them, along with injured and eliminated soldiers, and then he just started throwing grenades in this ditch. Basically no chances for survival here. So basically yes, as of right now everything that we have are just these confessions by ex-Wagner soldiers, and in case these statements are confirmed, I would not even risk to assume what's going to happen with Yevgeny Prigozhin. So long story short, if you want to keep track with his story and just overall this war in general, can you please subscribe to my channel? It only takes one click. The best way to support my work will be through my Patreon. You can unlock exclusive channel badges by becoming my channel member or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.